Great. Thank you, everyone, for joining. It's great to see all of you. We are live from New York, where it is snowing outside. I'm Yael, and this is Sahel. And today we're going to chat about the future of voice AI in 2026. And the plan is to chat for 35 to 45 minutes, depending on how many questions we get, really. So get comfortable, grab a drink. This is going to be a fun conversation. So we're just going to start with some introductions. So hello, I'm Yael. I'm a director of product and product marketing at Regal, which means I get to both help brands deploy agentic workflows, and then I get to shout out their success stories and all the learnings we have from working with them, with all of you. Sahil, you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us. My name is Sahil Mehta. I'm Chief Operating Officer at Regal. I oversee our sales, partnerships, forward deployed engineering, CS, and CX teams. So I have the opportunity to get a firsthand look in the way that customers are not only thinking about how to evaluate AI vendors, but also implement and scale AI agents.
Perfect. Great. So here's the plan for today. The goal is to give you our perspective on where voice AI is headed, in terms of the technology itself, and also the power of voice AI agents. Why is ROI so high, and how do we get it to be higher, and what are leaders in the industry doing? And we're going to do that through two lenses. So the first is through a data back lens. We analyze millions of calls. We'll get into the research in just a bit, but trying to understand what are leaders doing nowadays, and how are AI agents evolving, and we'll share highlights from a report that will go to your email right after this webinar is done. And the second lens is through the challenges that still exist in getting AI agents out there and successful, and what we're doing on the product side to address those challenges. And then at the very end, we'll have some time to do a live Q&A. So at any point in this webinar, if you have a question, just drop it in the chat. At the very end of this, we'll take a look. We'll pick a few to answer live. And then whatever we don't answer live, we'll follow up with you on async. So please jot those questions in. We'll make for an engaging discussion later on. And the goal is really, regardless of where you're at, whether you have built voice AI agents yourself, you're exploring solutions, or you're just curious about the space or the market, you'll learn something new here from our customer data. So to kick us off, I want to share, I've been in tech for several years now. I've worked at various companies across industries. I think I can safely say this is the biggest boom I've seen in any tech, certainly in my lifetime. It's changed the way that I interact with the world and with people around me, and I think that's true for probably everyone in the room, in the virtual room. And yet I find that when I talk to people in my life about what I do for work, they often underestimate the power of conversational AI for businesses. And the top question that I get asked is, well, are you just trying to replace humans? Like, are you just trying to automate human conversations? And I'm curious, Sahil, when prospects and customers come to you and their incentive is, hey, Sahil, help me just reduce my costs and reduce my headcount, what do you tell them, and how do you think they should be thinking about the potential of this tech?
Yeah, it's a great question. So customers approach us to deploy AI voice agents to replace conversations they're having today. And absolutely, there is a baseline economic benefit of being able to trade off higher cost human time for lower cost AI voice agent time. But I think that's just the first step, and that's not really where the transformational ROI exists. What becomes much more interesting is as you start to think about what is the art of the possible. In other words, if I had an agent that could be perfectly personalized, answer any question from my knowledge base, and be available 24/7 to act on any sales or customer service request from a customer, the question becomes not about how do I just replace the conversations I'm doing today with something cheaper, but what are the entirely new capabilities and experiences I can offer my customers to further delight them. So I think what you're going to see is that the first wave of implementations for most customers is going to look a lot like this cost arb opportunity. But I think what's more exciting and gives us the opportunity to redirect human intellect, human curiosity, human creativity into higher value workflows is when you start to invent net new processes altogether. So cost savings is certainly part of the equation, but we think the growth factor is going to be even more transformational. A good analogy for this is, several years ago, as smartphones and the iPhone in particular became more ubiquitous, you had the advent of the App Store, and all of a sudden it was very important for every brand to have an app. And if you look at the first iteration of many of those apps, they are simply just the website shrunk down and accessible via an app button on your phone.
True.
They didn't do much more than that. So I think what's really interesting is once you get past that first phase, then the question becomes, what are the net new capabilities of this technology paradigm that I have at my fingertips, and what could I do instead? In the case of the App Store, you saw people say, hey, if I have your phone, if you're on your phone, I have your location. I have details about your authenticated details about who you are. I have payment details. Maybe we can create a better way to move people and move goods around, and that's where you saw the advent of things like Uber and DoorDash. So that second generation of net new things is, I think, where customers should be headed as a North Star, but certainly a step in that process as a way to start in the technology is through automation of what we do today, and that's where you can really start to cut your teeth.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think that's what the data is showing is really this transformation of people starting to think bigger and thinking about, okay, how can they actually redefine what service looks like with their customers with this tech? So let's actually get into the data, and we analyzed millions of customer conversations across years of time, also across industries. I mean, we work with financial services, healthcare, insurance, home services, legal services, what have you. And we used a combination of LM analysis and semantic chunking to try to figure out, like, why is AI ready for this transformation? What does that look like in terms of customer receptiveness to AI? Like, how has that changed over time? How are AI agents able to be much more efficient? And what does that mean for human teams as well? And literally, what are AI agents able to do that they weren't able to do before? What kinds of workflows and actions are they able to contain on their own? And so we're going to start with the first bucket, which I thought was the most surprising finding. And I think it's because, we talked about this earlier, like, everyone interacts differently with GPT and Claude. Personally, I mean, I have days when I want to just rant about my life, but usually I'm asking questions that are shorter, I'm giving shorter feedback, I'm giving shorter requests. And the question that we were trying to answer is really how are customers engaging with AI differently? Now that for the most part, brands are not trying to mask that AI is talking to their customers. They're very upfront about it from the very beginning. And what we actually see is that customers are confiding more in AI agents in some use cases than in human agents. And the way we know that is in lead follow-up campaigns, also sometimes support or lead intake or qualification. We're seeing the distribution of time that customers talk with AI is higher than with human agents. The responses are on average longer, and they have a higher prevalence of what we call customer monologues, which is really just a chunk of uninterrupted speech. And if I think about some of the use cases that brands are unlocking with AI, it starts to make a little bit more sense. So one example that comes to mind for me is a financial services company that we work with. Their goal is to help consumers in Canada achieve financial freedom. And these are especially folks that do not have access to private, financial advisors, really. They're trying to increase access to that sort of thing. And they found that when they deployed a voice AI agent to help with intake, customers were actually asking many more questions and opening up much more to the AI. And they thought it was because, primarily they weren't worried about wasting the AI agent's time, right? So even think about the jargon of these industries, right? What is long-term gains tax? You could ask the AI, and then if you get an answer back that you don't understand, you ask again. You're like, I still don't get it. Explain it in a different way, right? And in addition, you're not worried about being judged by this person. And I've been in that situation where, in a conversation where there's jargon I don't understand, I think I've gotten better about this, but ultimately, like if you don't understand what the human is saying, eventually you're like, well, I guess I like will just leave or like try to figure it out by myself.
Mm-hmm.
Here you have this 24/7 resource with infinite patience, with no judgment, that you're able to interact with in this way. And in that particular example, what this financial services company saw is people started saving the name of this AI agent and calling back at any point that they had a question about services, about the product, about these terms or concepts on how to save and how to set themselves up for financial success. Another example where we've seen this is in healthcare. Again, like lots of jargon, especially when it comes to healthcare coverage conversations. Like I also struggle to make these decisions. And we see customers being much more engaged with AI, asking many more questions, and opening up much more actually about their circumstances. Because again, they can go on rants. Like there's no human on the other side judging them or telling them to stop, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious from your angle, Sahil, like what does this signal indicate to businesses and why is it so powerful that people are now so open to confiding in AI?
Yeah, it's a good question. So a number of the leaders and executives I speak to struggle with the same problem, which is how do I get clarity into what my customers think about me, what they say about me, and how they experience my brand?
Mm.
And millions of dollars are spent on things like mystery shopping, voice of the customer, customer surveys, and other indirect ways to understand how customers feel about and experience your brand. And that's got to beg a question of why is this like that? Why is there this obfuscation of the information, of the experience from folks who are providing it and the folks that are receiving it? And a lot of the reason of this goes back to the original data schema that is set up when you build your company. So when you start at the origin of your business, one of the first things you do is you set up and define what is the data spine of my business going to be? What information do I want to know about my customers? And then over time, you add new fields, you add new tables, you add new databases, and slowly but surely you get to this like very bottoms up compounded data view of your customers. But inevitably it's all driven by humans saying, I want to go do this thing and I want to have a measurable way to determine who I should do it for, what impact it has. And that's when when a new data field gets introduced. When we think about human conversations with associates, whether they're sales associates, customer success associates, whether they're human or AI, think about how much richer those conversations are in terms of providing context about the experience, the engagement level, the quality and satisfaction than a post facto survey or a mystery shop or a guess through some sort of a sentiment score. One of the really powerful things is that you have conversations which give you much more insight than a funnel or a chat would, and those conversations can actually be turned back into actionable data. So one of the things that I talk to our customers about a lot is that by having this voice data set up in a programmable, measurable, analyzable way, I don't know if that's exactly a word, but all of those things make it possible for you to make use of the information that your customers are giving you without having to go through an indirect route of getting that information.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, we've seen the way in which brands are using this additional context that they're now able to gather from these conversations where customers are more open with AI. They're maybe venting, they're maybe allowing themselves to be more frustrated, right, and share their frustrations.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the agent speech, right, like in personalizing the next conversation based on what you heard last time. It's also in, learning about your customer base, like what are the frustrations that are coming up most for them, or what questions come up most, or what circumstances come up most that we need to have like better coverage for. So I think it definitely speaks to an increase in data quality and insights. And also, I think it just speaks to a greater trust of customers in AI. And that is what allows brands to translate to increased loyalty and increased lifetime value, ultimately. And I think we do push like the brands that we work with really to optimize for trust and like building loyalty, because once your customers feel that way about you, they'll keep coming back, right? And they'll want to invest.
Yeah, there's a weird inversion taking place where historically the consumer experience with legacy chatbots IVR, IVAs, NLP-based agents was universally pretty bad. So the overarching sentiment was when you knew you were going to talk to something automated, you knew it was going to be bad. But now with the advent of LLMs and you have 1 billion MAUs on OpenAI and a big subset of those people using the real-time voice, the capabilities and expectations have gone up. And what's cool is that as soon as something becomes a new transformational customer experience like using voice on OpenAI or Anthropic, that becomes the standard.
Right.
So it's in the same way that after Amazon introduced 2-day shipping, every retailer was forced to react and respond, and that became the bar. Very similarly, we think high-quality generative AI voice experiences are going to be the bar for every consumer brand.
Correct. Yeah, that's where we're at, and I think brands are catching on to that and are feeling behind, if they don't get on this now. Cool. So next, I want to chat about the efficiency of AI agents, and I'm curious when brands come to you and talk about efficiency, like I'm thinking of something in particular, like what do they mean by that? What are their expectations around AI agent efficiency?
Yeah, well, look, when you operate a contact center, you basically have kind of 3 objectives that are pushing and pulling for prioritization. Objective number 1, I've got to deliver the experience, the expected customer experience, which can be measured in a number of ways. Number 2, I've got to deliver a staffing plan that allows us to deliver that allows us to do that with the amount of human hours budget that I have. And then 3, I got to do all of that at decreasing overall cost to serve and efficiency targets. And so the challenge historically has been I'm trading off experience for cost. And that experience can be both the customer's experience as well as the employee's experience if they're perhaps not able to get the desired schedule or not work when they want to work. So all of those are basically, workforce management and customer experience problems that leaders in this space have been dealing with perennially. And there's no silver bullet. There are only lead bullets. You can solve these in incremental, very quick ways. You can't solve them in these big sweeping solutions. So when we think about what does the introduction of AI agents do to this paradigm? It totally updates it. It totally changes it for a few reasons. When you talk about the experience levels, typically when you manage a team, human agents, their performance will be distributed on some sort of bell curve.
Sure.
And you will be constantly trying to train up and manage out and onboard new reps, which means perennially you're always trying to focus on how do I get everyone into that top part of the bell curve, but it's an unattainable goal. It's basically a revolving door. Well, AI agents, they're going to consistently deliver the experience. There's no bell curve. You'll have the agent, once it knows the ideal experience that you've defined, it can deliver that experience to everyone. The second thing you can do is you can solve this staffing paradigm, which is, hey, my customers may want to engage with me any time of the day, any time of the week, but I don't have the ability to staff people at all of those times because it's economically infeasible. Well, now you have this perfectly variable flex up, flex down capability, which is a really powerful thing, especially in seasonal businesses where perhaps like some weeks, months, times of day, times of the year, you get a large percentage of your calls. And finally, what does this mean for the folks that shift around? So when we talk about human agent roles in the contact center, typically contact centers face something like a 60% annual churn rate, which means we often tell people, you don't have to move on from anyone in your team. You just have to not hire back. And for the folks that do stay, those folks that do commit and spend more time in your organization, you have the ability to deliver them higher value roles while decreasing your overall cost to serve. So that's a pretty powerful paradigm shift that AI agents enable. And I think the way I think about it is if I were running a contact center today, I would think about my transformation to the AI-powered contact center in almost like 3 phases. First and foremost, I'd take the repeatable, tedious calls and move those to AI agents. That way I can scale down this revolving door hiring problem. Then I would attack more advanced use cases and move humans into more elevated agent design, QC, escalation type roles. And then finally, in phase 3, I'd be experimenting. So that thing we first kicked off with, this idea that, hey, I can define brand new experiences for customers, that's what I would be focused on in phase 3. And by then you would have not only the capability, the reporting infrastructure, the technology stack, but it gives you not just agents, but the capacity to build and deploy agents. So, from that perspective, I think efficiency is a really, really obviously important way to look at the contact center, but you can turn some of the traditional, kind of like best practices on their head because of the cost and quality implications that agents deliver.
Yeah, I will say, like, I have heard that expectation of, the unlimited capacity, concurrency, availability, and I think brands are typically thinking about AI in that way of like, okay, well, it can staff after hours, or it can, take a hold of my old leads. I think that really is the next step, is thinking about, okay, how can we redesign the existing experiences between human agents? And one other angle that I want to explore a little bit from our research is, how can we improve the experience of our human teams and empower them to do more important work that actually requires their expertise and quote unquote like a human touch. And what we looked at in particular is the distribution of human agent time on calls. And what we found is that after a particularly negative call or complex call or long conversation, they are taking twice as long to recover, meaning twice as long of a break between calls as after a normal call. And to some degree, it makes a lot of sense. Like, there's cognitive load added when you're on a call where there's a lot of friction, or there's customer frustration. Maybe you get frustrated, maybe you get fatigued, right? With AI agents, like, the operation model is completely different. AI agents don't tire, they don't need recovery time, they're on the next call right away. In fact, they're on multiple calls while they're on this negative call. And so I think the question becomes, like, how do you think AI can unlock the potential of existing human teams with that mentality of like, okay, we're not set out to replace all the agents. We're set out to maximize the service that we can offer to customers with AI and human collaboration in tandem.
Yeah. I think anyone who has worked in a operational customer-facing organization knows that there is, tribal knowledge, collective judgment, individual expertise that is often hard to document and even harder to automate. What we know is that obviously LLMs are very good with general knowledge and connecting to other best-of-breed tools like voice models or MCP or RAG to basically access knowledge or capabilities to go do things. And but what we don't think they're as good at, and what we think the human experience is important, is on three vectors. Vector 1 is creativity, vector 2 is judgment, and vector 3 is ownership. So when it comes to and you think back to what are the roles, how do the roles for a human evolve in a contact center in the future? I've talked about three roles in particular. I've talked about one, this idea of who's involved in actually building the agents and coming up with the experience that the customers are facing. That's a creativity-driven role. And a lot of the best practice and the understanding of the actual surface area of the customer experience will come from a human who's been through consumer experiences and will know what people want out of when they procure, whether it's insurance or a financial service or help with a legal case. The second job that we talk about, so first one being agent building, second one is quality control, and that's a function of judgment. And we think that there's going to be a lot of automated quality control, but the design of those programs and the ability to see nuances of things that perhaps an LLM won't pick up will still be a very critical and key human role of verification and quality. And then the last one is, when we talk about ownership, it is AI agents certainly don't take breaks, but they don't inherently feel this sense of ownership that your team members will feel. So when you have high stakes calls or escalations that can't be handled by what we've set up, your human agents will still want to play a role in those more complex interactions. So in my experience, what I've seen is that when you bring in the AI agents, you have the opportunity to allow your reps to be more human. The interactions that are robotic are called robotic for that reason. If we can move them into roles and functions, they're exercising creativity, judgment, and ownership. Those, I think, are key parts of delivering a very high value employer experience.
Yeah, makes sense. Great. So we talked a little bit about customer acceptance to AI and how even the employee experience is changing around AI being able to automate some of these flows and elevate some of these flows. I think the last question we were trying to answer and that we get all the time is like, okay, but physically, like, what are AI agents able to do nowadays? What kind of workflows are they handling? And this is where I think we've seen the biggest shift, and it's sort of been clearest in the data as well, where if I think back to beginning of last year, AI agents were handling much simpler tasks. And I'm talking, I mean, we even worked with brands that had AI agents call a lead as soon as they filled out some sort of interest form, ask them for their name and if they're interested, and then immediately pass them on to a human agent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So AI agents were basically thought of as form fills, just there for confirmation and data intake. And I think what we're seeing now is they're moving up from that conversation layer to actually being able to own outcomes and take actions on behalf of customers. And here we see a distribution of the actions of the AI agents that we've worked with our customers to launch and are out in production. The number one action you still see is call transfers, and I think that'll change over time, but I think especially because we work in highly regulated industries, often in like sales or conversion flows or even in support flows, ultimately you do need a licensed human agent to update a policy or close a sale. And we'll see how the regulations play out, but so far we have seen AI agents able to contain much more of the conversation, owning the full qualification, now owning, as we can see from the data, more of the appointment scheduling themselves, sending reminders, updating the CRM, etc. And in your experience, what have been some examples of use cases that have blown your mind or actions that you've seen AI agents starting to take on behalf of customers?
Yeah. To your point, some of the earlier use cases were fairly simple.
Yeah.
Ask a couple of questions and then move things along. And that was almost more like, hey, just filter out kind of bad quality leads from hitting my human agents, which has some inherent value to it, but honestly isn't the potential, doesn't meet the potential of the technology. I was thinking about some of the use cases, and there's obviously a number of different ways our customers have deployed these agents, but there are 3 job archetypes that emerged to me that I thought were really interesting, that if I were building a team as a COO, what are the roles I'd want on that team, and what roles have our customers picked agents to play? The first role is that of an operations manager. So think of someone who has to go through a multi-step and multi-stakeholder interaction. So a great example of this is with roadside assistance, where you get a call on a first notice of disablement. You have to gather information about where that person is, check a map via an API to see where where their nearest service center might be, then call out to service providers and accept bids, negotiate those bids, and then execute on a decision after the customer's accepted and process a payment. So that entire multi-step, multi-stakeholder process basically means you need to hold context and drive to a very clear outcome while hitting some operational, financial, and customer experience requirements. So in the same way that you might have historically had an operations manager working the phones to do that type of fulfillment, you now have seen AI agents take that job on. The second job is, I almost think of it as like a broker. So we work with a number of labor marketplaces, and it's a cool combination of you are trying to balance, you've got these shifts that you need to be filled or this work that needs to be done, and you've got people that can fill it at different rates on your labor platform, but you also obviously have a target margin you want to hit. So now it's almost like an optimization problem. So we've got the agent basically going out, taking sets of shifts that they need to fill, going out to people who might be interested in filling those shifts, and engaging in a negotiation that basically is designed to be random enough so that people can't predict what the agent's going to say, but also be very, very outcome oriented of, hey, you need to fill the shift while hitting this contribution profit on what we make as a shift. So what's really cool about this is that historically companies have been perhaps reluctant to delegate that degree of economic autonomy to frontline employees because of the risk of cost overspend. Obviously, AI agents being able to negotiate in a programmatic way is a really powerful way to balance between the control and the decentralization that a lot of our customers value. So that broker role was the second one I find really interesting. The third one, and this is one of my favorite leading indicators of where this could go in the future, it's the idea of like a concierge sales rep. And we've seen a couple of examples of this. More or less as companies, as a lot of e-commerce or digital first brands emerged, a key premise was that we're going to sell something online and we're going to be able to sell it without having expensive sales associates, which means we can deliver either a lower cost or a higher profit margin or some combination of both. What we found, and we've done this with, for example, provisional health providers or financial services providers that would, in a traditional sense, be a kind of white glove experience if you were to walk into a clinic or a bank or whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
And these digital providers are now able to provide almost the digital twin of that in-person experience, where you can collapse a digital funnel, reduce the friction, and basically say, hey, if you're in a category where customers are making high-stakes decisions and they want to try before they buy or look before they commit, the agent can provide a concierge sales experience for both when you're getting involved and if you're have questions and have concerns or have objections, but then also after you've purchased and you're getting onboarded to a product. So those types of roles are places that I think we're going to see more and more companies invest in, because they don't have to now choose between the trade-off of, can I provide this concierge sales experience with, can I do it in a way that's cost effective? They can do both now.
Yeah. I especially, the roadside assistance and negotiation examples come to mind for me too. And I get excited thinking about that as a consumer. Like, if I'm stranded on the side of the highway and I'm put on hold for an hour, right? I mean, that is a much worse experience than, oh yeah, I already know where you are. I already know what's nearest to you. I'm going to dispatch a service. And I think the fact that AI agents are in a place where they can be designed with that empathy and respect in mind for the vulnerable situation that the person is in, I think is quite powerful. And then on the negotiation front, I think you made a really good point about sort of reducing risk as a business. Like, ultimately, we're programming in limits of how high the negotiation can go. And that was a really clever use, I think, of like programmatic negotiation. I mean, we basically set up an algorithm and various agent voices so that the AI couldn't be gamed, basically. We're depending on how many bids there were and what the person was offering and how much you were allowed to offer for the job. We would give the next step. So yeah, I think we've already seen our customers start to push the bounds of what AI can do. Therapy intake and device troubleshooting are other examples that come to mind where, I mean, device troubleshooting can be infinitely complex. Same with inbound triage, right? Where people can ask all sorts of questions. And what we're seeing is AI agents able to take on more and more of those cases and containing more and more of those conversations, so that only the really specific custom asks are actually escalating up to humans. And here we're seeing the distribution of use cases we see among our customers. And as you see, it's shifting from confirmation to more action-oriented flows, where the AI agent is becoming a decision maker and like an action engine for the business, booking calls, qualifying leads, actually supporting them end to end through their issues. So that is the highlight of our report, and again, that will go out to you at the end of the webinar. So just to summarize, we looked at why is the ROI of AI agents so high from a few angles, and what we learned is, firstly, customer acceptance has dramatically improved to AI agents. Customers are able to confide in AI, share more context that's able to be used later on to personalize their service and their follow-up, because they're not worried about wasting the AI agent's time or they're not worried about being judged. We looked at the efficiency of AI agents and how, yes, of course, it has unlimited concurrency and capacity, and that addresses a lot of the staffing concerns of contact center operators trying to improve their efficiency, but it can even level up the experience of human teams to reduce churns and also give them the opportunity to work on what they're most skilled to be doing. And then lastly, the variability of what AI agents can do has dramatically increased, and we're seeing a change in 2026, already at the beginning now, from very simple intake, form fill style confirmation flows to being able to take decisions, handle different stakeholders, make requests and actually update systems. And that requires, obviously, being much more embedded in CRM flows and CCaaS flows. So ultimately, our customers rely on us not just to inform them of the trends, but to actually help them take advantage of these things. And that's why on the R&D side, we continue to invest in two key areas. The first is in making sure our AI agents are top class, right? The most human, the most natural sounding. That means optimal latency. It means making sure that accuracy continues to be high in terms of retrieving knowledge or, RAG. It means giving them flexibility to choose the right LLM or voice or tone or accent to create this branded personality that they want to lead with. And when we talk about our roadmap, we're thinking about how can we address the top challenges that are coming up today in the market. And I'm curious, Sahil, when you think about, the challenges brands face today, like why doesn't every business have hundreds of agents? What's keeping them from just taking full advantage of this and running with it?
Yeah. So when you think about the process of building an agent, for brands, they can build 100 agents, but the question is, can I deploy them in a way that is observable, scalable, and successful? What we find is it between the coordination with the core tech stack that the customer already has in place, the introduction and refinement of the agent, and building the system of reporting that ties back to actually P&L focused metrics. It just takes weeks. It takes weeks because there's coordination between the internal teams. There's change management that has to take place, and there's a lot of work. And we want to make sure that we test, monitor, and iterate. This is ultimately something new, but ultimately the customer's acceptance and confidence in scaling up to a meaningful volume is a downstream result of all of this work that's done up front, and between the actual technical execution and the human coordination, that's what ends up taking most of the time.
Yeah, it makes sense. And that is why the second focus area for us, besides just making sure our AI agents are as good as they can be and sound and feel as great as they can be, is speeding up that iteration. Because in practice, and this is across vendors, it does take weeks to launch an AI agent, and it takes a village from the building to the testing to deploying and monitoring and continuously improving. There's a lot of manual burden, and our vision is really creating a co-pilot system where AI can help improve itself and train itself. And that's why our focus is really on reducing that time to value and time to launch and time to get AI agents successful. So tell the folks in the room, why are we so focused on speed? Why does this matter for them?
Yeah, so I think as you think about the process of, we deploy forward deployed engineers into each of our customers, and there's obviously the primary visible goal is lead a successful engagement with your customer. But the secondary goal of forward deploying is to unlock product insight that is earned insight that can then be productized in some repeatable way. Mm-hmm. So when we think about that, there's going to be a consistent, there will always be the presence of some sort of bottleneck to getting things live. So the question is how do we systematically identify the bottlenecks that exist, the human effort it requires to overcome those bottlenecks, and then productize them faster and faster so that our human teams, both from our side and the customer side, can focus on higher order problems, spend more time exercising creativity and judgment, and build net new experiences altogether. So the point of speed is that the less time you are spending on relatively low complexity, time on task tactical items, the more time you can spend on creative unlocks, hypothesis testing, experiments, and it requires less human coordination on both the customer side and on our side. So the speed is not just about getting there faster, but it's about taking things we know how to do that we've learned how to do through our engagements, making it much faster to get those things done, so that the calories we're burning from human brains are spending that time on new hard problems unique to the businesses we're working with.
Yeah, and I'll just add as well, AI agents are not set and forget. They're much faster to train than human agents, right? But ultimately, new LLMs come out, people want to test those. New customer objections or questions or product releases come out. So that is why our vision is really building a co-pilot that starts with known transcripts of your human conversations, figures out what topics come up most, what should we cover in the prompt, and then starts to test itself, right? Simulate a conversation between an AI contact and your AI agent, evaluate that against your own success criteria, and then if test fails, they go back, update the prompt, and then rerun the test until they succeed. Once you deploy the agent, you automatically monitor the results. You extract, okay, which topics are underperforming? Where do I need to make improvements in the prompt? Where is there a gap in AI agent context or knowledge? And then it'll give you recommendations, and you just get to approve and say, okay, yeah, that checks out. No, I need to update the context here. And the cycle continues, right? And then it gives you more and more recommendations. So that's how we get there faster. And I think for sake of time, maybe we can stop here and take some questions. But I do just want to say it takes a village. That is why we partner with you on every step of the process. And I do want to hear a bit more about that FDE model in just a second. But if this is interesting to you, if you're looking for a partner to hold your hand through this process rather than just a vendor with contact center experience and experience deploying AI agents that are driving real business outcomes, we would love to chat and we would love to work with you. And so we'll put a link in the chat so you can book a demo with us. We'd love to talk. So that concludes the slides portion of today. Let's take a look at some questions. So let's actually start with this one. Like, what is an FDE and like, what does it mean to partner with one?
Yeah, it's a great question. So FDE stands for Forward Deployed Engineer. And in our engagements with our customers, we more or less have two dedicated AI engineer roles to support our customers. The first is responsible for the overall system that the agent and the overall success of the engagement. What I mean by that is to deploy a successful agent, you'll have considerations on telephony integrations, your CCaaS, CRM or CDP integrations so that we can have access to your customer data and use that to better personalize the agent, personalize the calls, and then obviously the system of continuous improvement. So the reporting on leading indicators of success as well as defects, the systematic introduction of hypotheses to reduce those defects and increase those leading indicators of success, and then iteration on the agent based on new technology available. So that entire process, that entire iterative loop and system is owned by our forward deployed engineer. They get pretty involved. And then they also are typically supported by someone who's much more focused on the prompting itself. So think of the actual work that the agent does on a day-to-day basis. So those are the rough two kind of jobs to be done that our team is doing with your team. And of course, all of this comes with the idea that we don't want to do this work in a black box. We want to make sure that your team is learning and understanding how to prompt, how to connect with your systems, and how to use AI agents to solve new business problems as well.
Great. Cool. And then I think we can take one more question. So we talked a little bit about, being able to learn faster with AI agents. Someone is asking, like, what's an example of a learning that you might be able to get with AI agents?
Yeah, I think something that our customers are able to do is surface previously unseen frustrations that customers have with their either onboarding or funnel or journey. In particular, I'm thinking of an example where, an insurance example where someone's calling on behalf of a spouse who perhaps is recently deceased, which is obviously a very challenging phone call, a challenging moment for that person to make. And what our customer was able to find was that there wasn't really good protocol for human agents to be able to handle this, and as a result, the AI agents, which were relying on the knowledge bases and the SOPs and the processes from the human agents, also didn't have a great way. But with some of our tools, we were able to observe and basically surface those conversations faster by basically saying, hey, these are some low intent conversations. Here's what the analysis shows is the commonality between them. And then we were able to introduce specific training on how to handle those sensitive situations. So I think the ability to turn anecdotal, hey, like I heard this on a call, to very programmatic, hey, here are where calls, go bad, go the wrong direction or fall off track, and then being able to track them down to a root cause and introduce a change in a matter of hours, not weeks or months, is one of the core benefits of this approach to building the system.
Yeah. Another example I've seen is analyzing the language distribution of callers, basically, and having to update, your public documentation because you have a lot of Danish speakers and you want to make sure that you're capturing support for them. So I like that one too. Good question. All right. Thank you so much for the time. That concludes our webinar for today. We will send out the full State of Voice AI report after this call, as well as a link to chat with us if you would like to. Thank you again for joining.